And I started to think about the life of Jesus a lot more as it pertained to who he interacted with, how he interacted with them, and all those different kinds of things. And what I started to see as kind of a reoccurring pattern was that Jesus spent more time talking to the people that were kind of skeptical about him. He was spending time with the crowds, with the people, with the, you could say, non-believer types. He was oftentimes found spending time with the kind of social outcasts of the day, the quote unquote sinners and tax collectors and the prostitutes and the fill in the blank. And then when I thought about my life, I realized that there was a disparity in focus. I was focused on the church, equipping and teaching the church. Again, not a knock. I think it's an important thing. But I wasn't spending very much time reaching the people that Jesus called us to reach.
Welcome back to the channel. My name is Micah, and you are watching or you are listening to From the Garoffice with Micah Foster. Today's episode features a conversation between me and Justin Khoe. Justin Khoe is a digital missionary, and he has been working on YouTube and podcasts and all kinds of things for a long time now. And we just have a fascinating conversation. So I hope that you enjoy this episode. Please subscribe and share this with somebody you love. God bless. Thank you, Justin, for joining me. This is my Garoffice. This is my office in my garage. We walled off part of the garage so that I could work from home and not have the kids always in my face. And so thank you so much for joining me from my Garoffice and to your home in Portland, Oregon. Thank you so much. West Coasters Unite. That's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome to my garoom. The camera and the lighting and all that don't do the rest of the room justice. Let me just say that it looks like we have our life together a lot more than we actually do.
Hey, that's kind of how it is, right? It's Instagram in real life. So let me ask you this, because you've been doing, and the whole reason I wanted to speak with you today and talk to you is because you've been doing online ministry for a long time. So you started, the first thing I knew you for, right? I don't know if it's the first thing you did, but the first thing I knew you for is probably the first thing most people know you for, which is That Christian Vlogger. Okay.
Yeah.
Which has since been shut down.
It has. It's been retired.
Yeah. It's been retired. It's moved on. You've done a couple of things since then, right?
Yeah, done several things since then.
And that was only like when did you shut that down? Like 2 years ago? Or?
No, not that long. I shut down That Christian Vlogger maybe last summer. So maybe almost a year ago.
Okay. It just feels longer because we've been quarantined. So yeah, everything feels longer. So before we kind of get into all that stuff, my first question to you is this: what would you, if you titled yourself, your job, what is your job?
Yeah. So my preferred title is digital missionary. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I choose that title is because I think it helps put the proper perspective of what I do. I'm not a pastor. A lot of times when people hear about what I do and they call me pastor, it's like, no, I'm not a pastor. I just pretend to be one on the internet. It's kind of a joke there. I'm not a pastor. I maybe lean more towards the evangelist perspective, but even that has connotations of like on a stage, in a suit, carrying a Bible, trying to baptize people here and there. And, cool. If that happens, fantastic. But that's not my mission. That's not my goal. Missionary more connotates that, like, at least in my mind, you're going to an unreached people group. You're trying to learn a culture and assimilate a language. Generally speaking, the people that you're trying to interact with are not of your faith. And so, for me, that really captures the heart of what I'm trying to accomplish. And the fact that it's digital, it's on the internet. I think missionary is also a convenient term in the sense that most missionaries don't make a lot of money, and most missionaries are supported by the donations and the gifts of the body of Christ. And that's very accurate to what I do as well. And so I think it helps frame things all in all. Yeah. So digital missionary is what I go by.
So how long have you been doing that? Is that your only job?
Yeah. So 4 years ago, I was teaching at a Bible college in Philadelphia. And one of our students that came through the program, Michael Trojanowski III, ended up getting to know him. And his story was kind of peculiar. At least it was peculiar to me at the time. He became a Christian because of a YouTube video. And
Wow.
I'm just like, whoa, really? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, cool, I guess, but like it was so unexpected, just so out of the ordinary. I remember going onto YouTube later that week and just like trying to find Christian YouTubers. I think I typed in Christian YouTubers, Christian vloggers, and maybe with very little exaggeration, there were like half a dozen people that I could find after
Yeah.
searching. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there was like John Jorgensen, who was an OG. And then I'm thinking out of everyone else out of that list, pretty much everyone out of that list has basically fallen off the YouTube, I don't know, radar, as it were. Um, and so I was just like, man, the fact that this could reach someone is profound. But then
Yeah.
also, why is there no one else doing this? And
Right.
and this was right around the peak of Casey Neistat's vlogging career
Okay.
or
Yeah.
whatever the case is. And so I'm like, man, it would be so cool because I was watching him every single day. I thought it'd be so cool, man. What would it look like for someone to be vlogging with a faith perspective and
Mm-hmm.
use that as a ministry? And so that Christian vlogger was born about 4 years ago. About 10 months into that journey, I really felt led by God to go all in on the whole digital mission stuff. Now, for context, I only had like, I don't know, 3,000 subscribers at the time. So it wasn't anything like fantastic or huge or any of that kind of stuff, nothing to write home about. And yet I really felt like God was saying, hey, lean into this, go all in. And so spoke to my wife about it. And long story short, we ended up resigning my position at the college and we moved back to the Northwest where her family is from. And the rest is kind of history. We've been chasing it now for the last 3+ years.
Wow. Wow. That's quite a jump. I mean, most people wouldn't make that kind of a leap, but it seems to, at least so far, worked out to be an all
Yeah.
right thing.
Yeah, it's working out all right. So you asked if this is a full time. It is full time in certain respects. YouTube is my bread and butter, and anything else that I do as far as work wise usually stems from YouTube-esque work. So I do some consulting for
Mm-hmm.
churches. People obviously find me through my YouTube channel because of that. I do a lot of public speaking, less so because
Mm-hmm.
of the coronavirus, but that's also tied to the whole YouTube thing. And
Right.
then occasionally I do media production for churches and or local businesses. And again, YouTube is kind of the portfolio that I show people for that.
Right. So it all kind of comes from that people find you, and other opportunities for income might come because of what people see online that you've already done.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me this, like, given the state of, you know, the stay-at-home orders and all that sort of stuff, and I know that some states are starting to open up and loosen up some of their stuff, but how do you think the church moving forward might shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting to watch all this take place. I don't know what things are like at your church or different
Mhm.
denominations across the U.S., but in my church, it's generally speaking one of those that is kind of on the back end of trends. Usually, there's like a running joke that we're usually like 10 or 20 years behind the trends,
And
and
go ahead,
so
fill in your tradition.
yeah,
What
yeah, yeah,
church?
yeah. So I was born and raised as a Seventh Day Adventist. Is generally more on the conservative side as far as just a lot of different things. And so when I go around talking about, hey, there's this new way to do ministry through the
Right.
internet and social media, generally speaking, I have people looking at me kind of sideways, just like, but is it really that good? Because isn't like
Hmm.
social media of the devil and like just this terrible addictive thing and yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
And so usually I'm met with skepticism and maybe even outright resistance when I go and share my stories and things like that. But now it's been fun to watch because now the very people who were like rejecting what I was trying to convince them of, and I think a lot of your listeners probably can relate to this. They're like, "Yeah, man, social media is awesome. It would be great to do ministry through YouTube or fill in the blank." And then they get back to their home church and they're like, "No, we're good. We're just going to keep doing the church services, every weekend or whatever." Now it's like, no, they have to. And I think that
Right.
that's one of the things that coronavirus has brought us is just, you know, innovation,
Right.
necessity has dictated that we will innovate. And so
Right.
that's been really interesting. And so like the question of what's happening in the future of the church is a really big question. I'm not too sure. I think especially as the longer the quarantine, as it's called, um, stays in place, the more we're going to see what do we really value out of an in-person gathering and what is maybe fluff, and
Mm,
out of that fluff, what can we do as a church to service it in different ways and to try new things. And so I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that after all of this is done, people will be much more open to maybe
mm.
breaking the mold a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's true for a lot of places. My sense is that it's going to be harder for the ones who were already the largest to make those kinds of shifts or try those kinds of things because there's already so much at stake. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Like the small churches under 500, I think that this is a great time for you. I mean, you can pivot so fast.
right.
I mean, I think that this is really a hidden opportunity.
Right. So what would you say to, to Christians? I mean, you talk about this all the time. What would you say to Christians, churches, pastors who are making that jump from exclusively or have made recently and are looking at that future? What would you say to encourage them to continue to innovate, or what are some things that they can do?
Yeah, I think that one trend that I've been seeing a lot lately is that a lot of churches are trying to basically recreate their weekend service. And I think that it comes from a good place. The desire is to create a sense of normalcy in kind of the weirdness of this world. And so they want their services to look and sound and feel as close as it can to the real thing. And like, cool, I can understand why that might be valuable to some people. But I think that now people are really understanding, no, this is not business as normal. This is a very unique situation. And I think as such, you have way more grace to adapt and to try and to experiment and even to fail. I think now more than
Mhm.
ever, you can try a thing, like try a new way of doing a video service or fill in the blank. And if it doesn't work, I think people are going to understand. And so
Right.
I don't know. I would encourage boldness. I encourage just a little bit of innovation. Just give it a shot. The thing that you've been wanting to see your church do for so long, now's the time to really move aggressively on that. And
Mhm.
they might be pleasantly surprised, like, wow, we never thought about that. That was actually really cool. I like the way that that worked. Or you might find out, wow, this thing that I've had in my mind all this time as this great idea really doesn't make that much of a difference. And then you're free to move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. I like that. So, let's go back. Let's go back in time. Let's look at how did you get started? I mean, you mentioned that a little bit, but where did you go with this daily vlogging thing? Or I don't know if it was daily, but where did you go with this Christian vlogger thing? What led to the next thing, and why did you see that as like the end of a season?
Yeah, so I guess there were three kind of big moves that I went through. That Christian vlogger was born out of just this desire to see something out there that didn't exist. So I was like, all right, well, I could be one of those people that just criticizes and complains, like, why isn't the church doing fill in the blank? I was like, well, I'm the church, so I could try it
Mhm.
and give it a shot, and which was kind of fun at the time because I had no experience when it comes to video editing or graphic design, didn't really even own a camera, know how to work it, much less. And so it was, it was just a labor of love, just something I'm gonna try. What's in your hand, kind of a feel like go for it. And so we
Yeah.
did. We did that for a number of years. One of the transition things that we attempted was a show called The Move, which actually has done very well. It was like a verse by verse podcast conversation through the book of Romans. So we would literally set a timer for 10 minutes, pick a couple of verses, and move sequentially through the entire book. And when the timer stopped, conversation ended. And so people would come back regularly to continue moving with us through the book. And we had thousands of people, I don't know, I guess just being discipled through the book of Romans together. And it was fantastic.
Wow.
And then the season that I'm in currently right now, I run a show called I'm Listening, and the focus is very different. It's not Bible study videos, it's not Q&A videos for young Christians, it's not church tech, which, not knocking any of it, there's a role for all that, but again, kind of thinking about like, where's the hole and how can I fill it, in the sense that, hey, earlier on there were no Christian vloggers, so I'll try that. Early on there weren't even like question and answer and Bible teaching videos on the internet that I could find, so I'll fill that hole. And then now realizing that there are so many people out there who have caught that part of the vision, at least. And so they are creating videos like that. They're answering questions and they're doing all the things that I was doing.
Mhm.
I realized, maybe what I'm doing isn't what is needed out there in the world as much. I started to think about the life of Jesus a lot more as it pertained to who he interacted with, how he interacted with them, and all those different kinds of things. And what I started to see as kind of a reoccurring pattern was that Jesus spent more time talking to the people that were kind of skeptical about him. He was spending time with the crowds, with the people, with the, you could say, non-believer types. And even beyond that, he was oftentimes found spending time with the kind of social outcasts of the day, the
Mhm.
quote unquote sinners and tax collectors and the prostitutes and the fill in the blank. And then when I thought about my life and who I was spending most of my time and where my energy was spent, I realized that there was a disparity in focus. I was focused on the church, equipping and
Mhm.
teaching the church. Again, not a knock. I think it's an important thing. Um, but I wasn't spending very much time reaching the people that Jesus called us to reach. And so
Mhm.
my new show, I'm Listening, is much less about me talking to the church, creating content for the church so that they can go and be the mission and be the hands and feet of Jesus. No, 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 no. It's not even me making content for the unchurched, like I'm speaking to the non-believer. But now instead of conversations to or conversations at, it's conversations with. And so now my show is me literally hanging out with the very people that, jokingly, all the people that my grandmother warned me about growing up. Careful about the atheists, careful about the pagans and the people who drink and who do drugs and
Uh-huh.
who are, fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Everything that is not the caricature of Christianity, that's who I want to spend time with. And so, for example, this last weekend, I just uploaded an episode with my barber that I met in Portland, who's pagan, and talking about that journey, that storyline, and those are the kinds of conversations I'm interested in. The show's called I'm Listening because it's really much less about me preaching to them and trying to
Mhm.
convert them explicitly in that way, and it's much more about me learning about their life, learning about their journey and their story, and building a bridge instead of a wall.
That's awesome. I've seen some of the titles from I'm Listening, right? And the one that grabbed me is sort of like this. You have a lot. They're very interesting titles, first of all, because it takes the most controversial sort of part of that relationship
Hmm.
and puts it at the forefront. Like a conversation with, or I can't remember what you called it. There was one called Atheist Attacks Christian, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
And now they're friends, and then explicit. And so it's very clickable because you're like, okay, let's talk about this. Let's hear in and that's a long story, right? So that
Yeah.
starts a long time ago. That
It's almost
that
2 years in the
journey
making.
to
Yeah.
friends and having that conversation. It's not just a, hey, we sat down one time, but it's like hours and hundreds of hours of conversations and typing and whatever back and forth and even visits. So at least I think more than one visit, I think. So
Just the one visit so far,
just
but
one
yeah,
visit.
but
Okay.
it's a lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth, and that's kind of one of the values of my show is I really want to try and meet people where they're at and spend time, and really the point isn't even making content. I really believe that even if I wasn't a YouTuber, even if I wasn't a podcaster, I would still be having these conversations and I would still be leaning into these friendships and relationships. For me, the whole content side of thing is just kind of like the convenient afterthought, as it were. Um, but I really do genuinely want to connect with these kinds of people. And I think that's really what makes the conversation so valuable. And so with the raging atheist, quite literally, he calls himself the raging atheist on YouTube. That's the episode you're referring to. This is a friendship that we've been having for nearly 2 years back and forth. And like, probably every other week we communicate, we go back and forth and talk. And it's not even just like we debate Christianity versus
Mhm.
atheism or any of that kind of stuff. It's just, hey, how's life? What's going on? This last week, myself and one of our mutual friends, who's actually a polyamorous pagan in Seattle, the pagan and I partnered together to buy face masks for the atheist and his daughter, and we sent it to him. And it's just like
Mm.
it's just friendship. It's just that's all that it is.
I think that's super cool. And I love that you said, aside from the YouTube thing, aside from the content thing, those are just sort of extra that you
Yeah.
would still want to have these relationships. It's authentic, it's real, it's not, you're not using them, is
No,
what I'm
definitely
saying.
not. And I actively try not to, because I know that there's that element of it. I don't, this has been born out of a not only a desire but an awareness for what was happening in my life. As I was paying attention to this trend, I was seeing more and more that God was connecting me with these quote unquote others. Like it seemed like in the span of a year, like so many of my new friendships, and maybe partially because I live in like the Portland area. And so it's a
Hmm.
very eclectic group of people. This is
Right.
not the Bible Belt, but I'm meeting atheists of all stripes. I'm meeting pagans, and I'm meeting gay people, and I'm meeting like fill in the blank. It's like anyone that you want in Portland, like you can find. The
Hmm.
mantra of Portland is literally keep Portland weird. And so there's like this real
Right.
zeitgeist of being countercultural or whatever. And so you run into like interesting people with amazing stories all the time. It's just like, okay, God, I'm here for a reason. I need to figure out how to do this because I grew up in a conservative Christian home. I never had non-Christian friends growing up, and so for me, a lot of it was that I didn't know how to have conversations with these kinds of people without coming across as a jerk, without like Bible bashing them and shoving my religion down their throat. And so this project was really just an intentionality in my heart posture towards people and a desire to get to know them a little bit better.
That's awesome. You mentioned the zeitgeist of Portland, which really means
Yeah,
the spirit of the times, right? So the
yeah,
spirit of the times is in Portland is just that everyone is there.
yeah.
Anybody who believes anything can be there, and it's all good, and everybody's cool with it, sort of thing. That's the idea, anyway. So, um, I know I have my sister used to live in Portland, and I got some friends up there and stuff, and it
Cool.
is totally different. The P&W, as they say, is kind of a little bit different than the rest of the country. I know every part of the country has its own characteristics,
Hmm.
but it is a little bit different up there, and the people are eclectic, I think is the word that you said,
Yeah,
for sure. And it can be a jarring if you're not used to being around a lot of different kinds of people. If you're
absolutely.
used to being in a place where pretty much everyone says, "Yeah, I'm a Christian," I think, or a place where everyone kind of identifies with, "Oh yeah, Sunday is church day." That's a totally different place, and you're
Right.
going to be like, "What is happening here?"
Oh yeah, I mean, I went to church school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and even did some college stuff in a Christian school, Christian university, and like worked for the church like from the moment I was like high school on, kind of a thing. And so it's like day in and day out, surrounded by people who largely like we're on the same page,
Hmm.
and then get thrust into this culture where it's like, nope, that's not the case. And I guess it's somewhat scary. It's somewhat uneasy in the sense that like, wow, it's a new adventure every single day. But on the other hand, it's really refreshing. Like it's really fun to be able to connect with people from different backgrounds. There's something
Hmm.
life giving about it, and I really believe this. And maybe it's because for maybe as we do this, we're more in tune with the heart of God. There's
Mm.
something beautiful about that. Like water that isn't running just stagnates and gets putrid. And so when you're forced to be in a position where you're spending time with other people, it keeps everything fresh, I'll say. And it's been quite a blessing.
For sure. It's kind of like, when you experience, at least for me, when I experienced, like I did a summer abroad. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I
Where'd you go?
experienced that, Germany. So I was in
Oh, okay, cool.
Heidelberg, Germany for, 2.5 months. And then like we had 4 days of school, and then we had 3-day
Mhm.
weekends. So you hop on a train, you go somewhere, right, for the weekend. So that was awesome. Great experience. But one of my favorite things was just learning different worldviews and learning
Yeah.
how these people saw things and lived that was completely different from what I grew up with and what I was around. And it really broadened, my my respect, my understanding of where people are coming from on different things. And that was just Europe. Now, if I went somewhere else, if I went to an Asian country, it would be the same thing in a whole different way, right? If I went to Russia or something, it would be the same kind of thing, or South America. So
were there certain differences that stood out to you as particularly interesting?
The one of the biggest things was that, and this isn't particular to them. This is like all over the place. But the idea that that kind of post-Christian culture, that idea that, okay, God was something we had in mind and used to get through or get to a certain point, and now we don't necessarily need that anymore. That was a big thing, I think, that I saw. And then the idea that, like, these beautiful, architecturally beautiful buildings, these church buildings that have been created centuries ago, were now museums. And we're not being used for the purposes, a lot of them, not being used for the purposes that they were constructed. And that just really took me back. And I just, I had to really think about how, okay, the church is a people, it's not a building, right? And we can appreciate the construction. And I like going to these places and checking it out, but the church is people. So those things don't necessarily matter anymore.
Yeah.
Those are just a couple of things that stuck out to me. But I really enjoyed my time there. I was there with a group of people. There's about 50 of us that stayed in a house, and so it was a multi-level house. And we had roommates, and there's all these rooms and stuff. And we lived down the street from the Heidelberg Castle, and so we would have about half of us would say we were Christian, and the other half were either skeptic or not Christian, or kind of seeking in some way. And so those of us who were Christian would have like little worship nights down at the castle, acoustic guitar and these like old arches, and stuff. And it was awesome. And some of the other people would come along, and I actually, with some of my friends, we wrote a paper for the house, a weekly paper. And it was like my work study for the summer. Right. So we got paid to write a paper, and it was, we called it the Zeitgeist. And we would just write stories. We would interview one another. We'd write travel stories or whatever. And I had a blast doing that. That was just so much fun. And everybody would wait for it to come out. We would stay up all night printing it. We'd wait for it to come out. And the next day in class, nobody would be paying attention. They'd be reading the paper. And I loved it. I was like, this is awesome.
That's cool.
So it was a great summer. But so you talk about making these connections, making these friendships. So what would you say to the Jesus follower? Okay. Not someone who's simply culturally Christian, but someone who is trying to follow Jesus. What would you say to that person if they do not know or engage with or are friends with anybody who's not like them?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of how do I say this without needlessly offending someone. Part of being a Jesus follower embodies, yes, reflecting the teachings of Jesus, absolutely. But it goes beyond that. It distills itself even down to living life similarly to Jesus. And so when I look at least when I read the Gospels and I try and get a sense of the heart of Jesus and what mattered to him and who mattered to him, not that people mattered more or less, but as far as what was his mission, I guess I should say.
Right.
It seems clear that he was going for people who didn't quite know. He didn't come to those who were healthy but the sick, right? This idea. He came to seek and to save the lost. And even if you think about it in his explicit commands, hey, I'm taking off, and now I give you this great commission: go into all the world, preaching the gospel to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And like the question is like, if all we're doing is congregating on the weekends, whether in person or digitally, are we actually fulfilling that commission? are we actually really modeling the life of Jesus? Very few times do we actually see Jesus in the synagogue on the Sabbath. I mean, it's documented. Luke 4 talks about, hey, no, this was his custom. He was there. But as far as the things that people thought were noteworthy, that was worth writing down, very few of those stories take place in a synagogue or in a church building. The vast majority of them take place out in the marketplace, out on the hillside, out on the lake, or fill in the blank. And so I don't know, to me, it highlights the importance of not what do we do in the sanctuary or in the church building, but really what do we do in our day-to-day life? And how do we follow Jesus in those moments? And so, I guess what would I say to them? I would just challenge you to look, take an introspective look. And it's okay if it feels uncomfortable, because I mean, I had to do this and I realized, oh, I don't think I'm actually hitting all cylinders right now. But are you really following Jesus when Jesus seems to move out into the world and you stay in the church?
Right. And that is, I think there's something to this, like, when someone first, they're a baby Christian, as it's called, I don't like that term, but that's just what most people would say. And they're just starting out their relationship with Jesus. They're just starting out, and they're kind of in that those first stages of sanctification, where they're kind of, God is convicting them, and there's some things that they're shedding. There's some habits or whatever that are coming off of them, and they are kind of in that moment, and they're in their most maybe vulnerable Christian state. And so they've just perhaps left some of that community that we're even talking about. And they left that community, and then they hear someone come along and say, you need to go back to that community, or you need to, that sort of thing. I think there may be a certain amount of time. I don't know if you can put a time on it or whatever, but there may be a certain amount of growth that needs to happen, that someone needs to maybe detox from a toxic environment. Not that all those people are toxic. Not saying that.
So let me just jump in here and let me ask you this: is that actually biblical?
That's a great question.
Because I understand the heart behind that, and that's actually the way that I used to approach ministry in the past. But let me recount a familiar story. Jesus and the disciples, they just get off the boat. They're moving towards the town, and this crazed man, bound by chains, barely has any clothes on, and is clearly demon possessed, come running at the disciples and Jesus. The disciples turn tail and run away, only to find that Jesus stood still and actually engaged with this individual, eventually cleanses him and heals him. And this man wants to get on the boat to follow Jesus and to be with the crowd and to be with all these people, because his life has been changed. And in a moment, Jesus says, no. Why? Because I want you to go back to where you came from to tell them. And you see this over and over and over and over and over. Very seldomly, if ever, I mean, hard pressed to even think of one story. Maybe there is one, but I can't think of one, where Jesus is like, yeah, hang out with me and we'll take you through this course. We'll protect you from the world. And once you're indoctrinated and all your bad habits fall, like, it doesn't, I mean, maybe that happens, but I haven't heard of the story yet. Like the command is always, no, go right back to where you came from.
Yeah. I appreciate your pushback. That's really great. I think there are some, to your point, there are some stories where he says, don't go tell anybody,
That's
which
true.
is different,
That's also true. That's also true.
But he's got both going on. And then he does call his first crew, come drop everything, follow me. And you sacrifice basically the life you thought you were going to have.
Yep.
And
good points.
Come hang out with me. So, a one size fits all is probably not there, but I love the question. Is that biblical? Is that really there? That's really powerful, because
and even with the disciples that he said, hey, come and hang out with me for 3 years. One of the very first things that he does, Matthew chapter 10, he sends them right back out. And they're like, they don't even have clarity on who he is yet. Like, they're clearly not like in keeping with all the teachings of the church to be established yet. Like, Peter very quickly after is like, rebuking Jesus, and he's like, "Get behind me, Satan." The whole thing is like, so they clearly don't have all their ducks in a row. They're like,
Yeah.
very shortly after, like, "Hey, there's a bunch of other people over here preaching. Should we call fire down from heaven to kill them?" It's like, whoa, hold on, like, take it easy, pump the brakes just a little bit. And even in the middle of all that, like, knowing that in just a couple of years they're going to end up rejecting him and running away, and one of them is going to betray him. Even in the middle of that, one of the first things that he does, Matthew 10, is he sends them out into the cities, go out and preach. And there's something beautiful about that grows their faith, that by actually being a part of his mission, they are strengthened and they are actually sanctified, because they come back thinking, holy crap, like, what just happened? Like, even the devils are obeying, and we're able to heal people, and this is crazy. Like, there's something about participating in the mission of Jesus that actually edifies us, that sitting still in the synagogue or the church doesn't do for us.
Sure, absolutely. I think and you said, I appreciate the heart of where you're coming from, and I used to approach it that way. And I don't think there's a one size fits all, like I said, but I think there are perhaps some instances where there needs to be a break between the old and the new.
Okay.
Let's say, like, when there's a alcoholic addiction, right? And not just, because I don't have anything against alcohol. I'm just talking about, like, getting drunk,
Sure.
alcoholic addiction, those sorts of things. Let's say someone comes out of that, right? And they're doing whatever their process is for that, right? Well, I don't want to send them right back into a bar.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And maybe the line that needs to be drawn is maybe more location based than people based. Maybe it is wise not to tell a former alcoholic, hey, maybe don't go to the bar. But do we extend that same logic to hanging out with his friends that he used to go to the bar with? Like, can he not do dinner at their house?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. That's very fair. And I think those are great questions. And I think always it's the individual conviction that someone is going to have if they're being honest, and they have a real relationship with Jesus, and there's going to be that spirit-filled conviction of, no, this is what I need to do. Right? This is what God is telling me to do in my circumstance. And I think that those can be different from person to person, based on how God has made us, created us, what his vision is for our life, what his intention is for our life. So I think there's a lot of things at play there.
No, I agree with you in principle, for sure, that it's definitely not a one size fit all thing. Though the principle of being about the mission of our Father is a one size fit all. Like, that might look differently, how we do it and how we live that out. Absolutely. That there's a difference, and there's variety in that for sure. But the bottom line is that, to be a true follower of Jesus is to follow him in all aspects, including the mission of what he has. And, so when it comes to, like, people's convictions about I should or shouldn't be with these people or that, I want to be like, obviously, at the end of the day, hey, if there's a genuine spirit-filled conviction, you have to honor that. Like, that's absolutely the case. And with that being said, I would also say that a lot of times what we use language around convictions are actually seated just in fears. And God doesn't give us the spirit of fear.
Hey, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. So many of that thing. And what I chose to kind of pick on in the beginning there was one extreme, but then you have the other extreme, right? And then you have everybody in between, which the other side of it is exactly what you're talking about, I think. Whereas we're just like, no, God's told me to be, can't be a friend of the world, those kinds of things where it's just like, no, I'm supposed to be separate and holy. And
well, I'm kind of a stick in the mud on this, because I know, like, that's where I was coming from. I didn't want to hang out with these kinds of people out of conviction. No. Like, and I would quote Psalms 1:1, like, blessed is a man, who doesn't walk in the counsel of the ungodly. And I would use scripture as a defense, as an excuse to say, this is why I'm not about my Father's business. And I would have all kinds of justifications. But the reality of it all was like, no, this wasn't a spirit-filled conviction. This was a fear of me getting their filth on me. And maybe that's a very strong language to use it, but like maybe it was a fear of being deconverted or being influenced by the world or whatever the language that you might use in your church was. But it was fear based. It was like, man, what if my faith isn't strong enough? What if I don't know what to say or how to respond to their question? Or what if it doesn't work? Or what if I'm ridiculed? Like for me, when like in hindsight, I look at it and it was fear based. It wasn't actually like the Spirit saying, no, Justin, I want you to stay in the church the rest of your life and never be about the mission of the church.
Yeah. I, as a younger man, I had the opportunity to speak. I was in youth ministry. I had an opportunity to speak in our, big church, the adult service,
Yeah.
and, our pastor was on vacation. So he was like, hey, why don't you fill in for me? I was like, hey, awesome. Great. I'd love to do that. And my message was a challenge to not be, to not only know Christians, to not only engage with Christians, and to look outside that normal circle that you surround yourself in.
Yeah. Because
God loves everyone and wants a relationship with everyone. And why wouldn't we be a part of that process? And some people just loved it.
Yeah.
And as you know, some people just hated it. and the reactions were so extreme. From the same people, and from the same group of people, the reactions were so extreme. And one of the things that I said was like, and this was very controversial, and I realized that, listen, you think that bringing your friend to church is the win. One of the problems is you took your friend from their church and brought them to ours. And if that's you, go home.
I think you were doing quite well until that last line. I can see why. No, I get it. And of course, there's this like young zeal and this passion,
absolutely.
So I totally get it. I've preached many a message like that, and that's why I'm trying to make my point without like being too dogmatic. But this is something I really do believe in. But yeah, man, like if the only way to do mission or to fill in the blank, is preach the gospel, so bring someone to the church, it's like, man, that's a really weak model. Like it would be so much better if the model was something like, hey, the Holy Spirit transforms your heart, gives you the power, the same power that resurrected Jesus from the dead now lives in you and breathes in you. And it's true that when you open your mouth, it's the Spirit of your Father who speaks, and that you don't even have to worry about what you're going to say, because in that moment, God will bring all the words back to remembrance. And then you can actually go and minister in love and power and grace and wisdom and tact and actually reach lost people and bring them to Jesus rather than a church. Like it would be so cool if that was actually what was available to us.
Now you sound a lot like someone else that I hear quite often. His name is Francis Chan. I would like to take that as a compliment.
Anytime I'm lumped into that group, I'm happy with that. He's a good guy.
In some of that conversation that you're saying right now, and I really appreciate a lot that he's made some really tough decisions in his life to do what he feels is right for him, right? And that's good. I think that's good. People who can make really hard pivots in their life that cost them because of personal conviction. Yeah, I think that's a big deal.
Maybe this disclaimer is unwarranted, but I don't agree with everything he says, but there's so like you just said, I admire his story so much and his courage and his dedication to what he believes. It's legitimately awe-inspiring. I remember actually because John Jorgensen, another YouTuber, and we actually did a video series through his book Letters to the Church, I think it was. And one of the things that he has said that stood out to me, and I'm paraphrasing loosely, was some idea. It was like, Christians should not like the default in Christianity shouldn't be stay. And if God calls me, I go. As he's interpreting the mission and the purpose of the church, he says, like, he challenges, like, basically the paradigm he's suggesting is the default is we as Christians are going as missionaries, as, fill in the blank. And if God calls us to stay, then we will. And, again, nothing is a one size fit all as far as like how it's applied, but that paradigm really challenges me. And I'm grateful for that challenge, for sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have that book and I haven't made it all the way through because I think there's like points where I'm like, I need to sit on this for a while.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
Like I'm not sure I can move on yet. I just need to think about this part for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, his whole model of how he is interpreting scripture to model what he believes the best representation of the church is completely different than
I mean, this is the guy that quit his
people.
mega church to do a house church.
Right.
And which is interesting though, because I think about the people that are in my life. I think about the people who are more, are coming into faith. And I think about what they, one, what they need, and two, really what they're craving. And it does seem that a house church fills more of those needs. They're looking for a deep community. They're looking for intimacy. They're looking for a safe place where they can know and be known. They're looking for like practical how-tos and mentorship and all this kind of stuff. And then when I think about what lifelong Christians are looking for, a megachurch seems to fit that a little bit more. And I would actually lump myself into that second category. Like when I think about attending a church, I go to Bridgetown in in Portland here, John Mark Comer, mega church out here, because like, man, the music is like world class. The teaching is exceptional. There's always something I'm learning that's new, and this and this and this, and like I love it, and I genuinely do, and I think it's a fantastic church. And yet, what I see that my friends who are coming into faith need more and more and more is me inviting them over to my house, and we do dinner together, and me going to hang out with them, and we go to the dog park and walk our dogs together. It's just like literally doing life with them. I see that as being the most potent thing. And when I think about what Jesus would do, or what Jesus did in fact do, it seems to be more of that latter category. Like he was spending time in people's homes and hanging out with them, out on the lake, on the fishing boat. He was spending time doing life with people as opposed to creating a mega synagogue.
That's great. That's good stuff to think about, man. Well, I've spent just about an hour with you, and I know that I told you it'd be about an hour, and I don't want to take up all your time. I know you got things to do. You got a lot going on, and so do we. And so I just wanted to say thank you again for, spending the hour with me and challenging me and enlightening me with some of the things that you've experienced and you're going through. And one more thing, if someone was to want to find you or support you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah. So if you're brand new to all this kind of stuff, first off, hi, welcome. You can find my website at justinkhoe.com, JUSTINKHOE.com. And it should have links to all the different shows and podcasts that I do. So that would be the easiest place to find me if you're on Instagram or Twitter at jkhoe, JKHOE. And then as far as supporting, patreon.com/jkhoe. We're actually doing a special right now where any new patrons this month will be sent some free merch. We got this, I'm wearing this hoodie right now, which says slow to speak, quick to listen, which is in keeping with the mission of my current channel right now. This idea of, hey, you got something to say, I want to listen. Which I'm realizing as a podcast interview, it's harder to do because you're asking me questions. But that's kind of, most of my content is more me listening than talking.
There you go. Yeah. And I think that's awesome. And we really appreciate you kind of filling that void. I think that's a void that I don't think I've seen it. I don't know. I can't even think of another one.
Yeah. And that's part of why I'm so interested in doing it. Is because, I think that this is one of the next steps in evolution in ministry, in how we go about relating to the world and all that kind of good stuff. With a quick disclaimer though, that Christian Vlogger and the Move stuff, which we referenced earlier, are all family friendly. You can watch that, not a problem. I'm Listening is an explicit show. And as someone let me know in the comment section, said, what do you mean by explicit? Are there bad words? I just responded, yep. When you're hanging out with pagans, when you're hanging out with atheists, and you're giving them permission to be themselves and to not hold anything back, there's a little bit of cursing. There's a little bit of blasphemy. There's a little bit of talk about drugs and alcohol and all kinds of things. I'm not saying that it's coming out of my mouth. Right. I'm very family friendly, but because I'm hanging out with people and I want them to be who they are, it is an explicit show. So I actually age restrict my current channel now to anyone. Like, you have to be over 18 in order to watch my videos.
Wow.
So, there's a little disclaimer there.
So my son will not be able to find you on there.
He will only be able to find you if he signs on to your account, and then that's
exactly. Exactly.
But if he has a normal account and he didn't lie when he said, "Are you filming?"
Right.
He won't be able to find those videos.
That's correct. I set it up for him and he's 10. So as far as I know, he hasn't changed it. So, no, I really appreciate it. And for anyone who's listening and is just wondering, what's Patreon? What is that? It's a way to support creators, and also sometimes get some exclusive swag or exclusive content for the creator, for the supporters. So
yeah, so like the whole digital missionary concept, like at least in my faith tradition, when you are going to be a missionary, you raise funds, and generally speaking, people pledge to say, "Hey, I'll give you $10 a month," and you try and find as many of these kinds of people who are going to give you a couple bucks a month, ranging into the hundreds of dollars a month, and then that's how you're able to sustain yourself as a missionary. Patreon is the same thing for this digital missionary, where you can pledge and say, "Hey, I'll give you $5 a month," or whatever the case is. And as a result, you get access to behind the scenes content, extra episodes, bonus contents, and a whole bunch of other things, including free swag for this month.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, thank you, Justin. Really appreciate the time. Let's keep in contact. I'll keep watching your stuff. I like it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it,
man. Thank you. Have a great day. God bless you. And can't wait to see what God does through those conversations you're having.
And you too, Micah. Take care.
Well, I hope that inspired you. I hope that it helps you grow in your faith, and I hope that it helps you grow in the way that you think about how you relate to others in the world. We're supposed to love all people, and I love how Justin challenges me, and I'm going to continue following along with his journey as well. Well, God bless you. I hope that you'll consider subscribing and becoming a regular part of the community here. God bless you. See you later.